Welcome to the Centre for Christian Spirituality. Today we are reflecting on the Gospel of the Mass of the Day for Christmas, and we wish you all the great blessings of this wonderful feast, and the Gospel captures just what a great feast it is. We invite you now to listen to the reading. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood, or by the will of the flesh, or by the will of man, but of God. And the Word was made flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, 'He who comes after me ranks ahead of me, because he was before me.' From his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. It is God, the only Son, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known." There is such richness in this prologue of St. John. When we read it, we can see how rich it is. But if we look at it through the eyes of John and the theology of John, it is even richer. I want to begin in the middle, where it says that the Word came to his own. He came into the world, that he had made the world, but they did not receive him. But those that did receive him, he gave the power to be the children of God. I think that's the heart of the prologue, because all of the Gospels are about the fact that Jesus came and what was the response of people to him. And what we see there is that some did respond and some did not respond. What is important, I think, is what happened to those who did respond. They became children of God. And I think that's filled out when we look at the whole scene there. In the beginning was the Word. Obviously, this captures the first words of the Old Testament. In the beginning, God created. So what we have here is a new creation. It's not just a descriptive thing, it's an announcement of a new creation. And the first thing that God did in creation was, he said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And you can see how light is so fully represented in the text that we have. And I've mentioned to you before that words in John like light and truth and love and life, you don't find their meaning in a dictionary. They're words that describe the divine life, that God is love. And that appears in Jesus. As the Father has loved me, I have loved you. And we are to walk in the love that Jesus has given us. God is light. Jesus is the light of the world. We are to walk in the light and to be the light of the world. So what we're seeing here is a sort of a massive wave, a tsunami of the divine presence coming into humanity. And for those who are open to it, they are actually caught up in it and transformed to be part of the divine life that has come in the Word. So a very rich passage indeed, I think, yes.
When I first heard the words, I'm always struck by the absolute power and poetry of this beginning in John's Gospel. Yeah. And then when I heard Bishop Walker describe what it was all about, I'm struck once more by the extraordinary depth and richness of this passage. But I'd just like to comment on that very beginning. In the beginning, was the Word. And I think this is a marvellous description of someone telling the story of this absolutely moment in creation,
Yes.
when, as you say, everything is changed, and that all life came into being through him. So to me, this is this extraordinary force of creation that it happens, the birth of this child. But the birth of this child, as I understand it in John, actually the birth of this child happens at the very beginning of time. That this is with us always.
It's pre-existent, yes.
Pre-existing. So I love the repetition of the Word, and I love the Word made flesh. I love the way that in our prayers still the Word is a very profound sense of Jesus. So I don't think it gets any more beautiful or more poetic than these verses.
I guess this is the part of John's Gospel that always resonates with me. And it resonates with me because of, you mentioned, Virginia, the poetry that's there, David, the connection back to the Hebrew scriptures and the book of Genesis. There's also another little thing which is apropos of nothing, is that's the way I learned Greek in the seminary.
So, okay.
Eugene Stockton,
I did that too.
who was teaching us Greek, used this passage, the prologue of John's Gospel, as the way in which we came to be invited into the Greek language.
It's the easiest Greek in the New Testament.
I think the two of you are showing off, actually talking about their Greek. So, but anyway.
But there is something just beautiful in
is,
it, and I think even if you don't understand, you can still get caught up in the poetry and the way in which the writer of the Gospel just brings you in, and and you get that sense of this word making its home in me, in us, in all of us, and the beauty of that, and I mean it just to stop and to reflect it. You just can't stop reflecting on it.
Yes. The words of Athanasius came to my mind,
Yeah.
that the human became divine, that the divine became human in order that the human can become divine. And I think that captures what's there.
Yeah.
Well, obviously we've enjoyed that text and drawn a lot from it. We'd like to give you a space now to see what you draw from the text. Welcome back. We invite you now to listen to the text read again.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him. Yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood or of the will of the flesh or of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and lived amongst us. And we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, 'He who comes after me, he ranks ahead of me, because he was before me.' From his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. It is God, the only Son, who is close to the Father's heart, who has sent him who has made him known."
it's one thing to be in awe of the text, but of course, how do we apply that in our life? And sometimes the greater the text, the harder it is to apply. I go back to that middle section again, that those who receive Jesus are not born of the will of man, but of the will of God. And I felt that the will of God was the thing that came through. I've been reading a book from our tradition recently that saw the will of God as the centre of our journey to God. And I thought there that if we are going to be overtaken by the divine life, then what is that mean to us? And it means that our wills become one with God. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So I thought I might focus on that and just see how I would apply that in my life.
And for me, I think it was picking up from that concept of God's will. But sometimes I wonder, do I let the dark or the doubt or the negative impact on my ability to spread that light, to be the light? And so for me, I think it's this constantly checking in on myself. Am I helping radiate that light? Am I promoting Jesus as the light of the world? So I would like to concentrate on that over this January period where there's plenty of light. I should get the little hint.
Yeah. There was part in that where the writer was saying, we're not the light, but Jesus is the light. And yet it strikes me that there is a sense in which we are the light. And I think that's where our sacramental system impacts and changes the whole relationship that's ours with God, that this person of Jesus it becomes a part of us through the sacraments of our church. And so there is a sense in which I do become the light because I'm the one who is revealing that presence of the one who lives within. So I guess I'm just a bit overawed by that, and so I want to kind of sit with that. What does this mean, and how do I become that presence in the world that does add a little bit of light, that brings joy and hope and peace to those whose lives I might touch.
Thanks, John. We invite you now to draw something from the text that you could apply in your life, because the Lectio process is meant to end up with the transformation of our life, not just with prayer, but to actually change our life so that we can live as Jesus lived. So what can you draw from this text? Welcome back. We invite you now to just spend a short time in prayer, that we can't really achieve the things that are supernatural without the grace of God. And what we are trying to do is to live a supernatural life because we're living as Jesus lived. So we invite you now just to spend a short time in prayer, asking the Lord for the strength and the courage to implement what you have chosen. We conclude now, wishing you again all the blessings of Christmas, and we hope that we might see you again next week as we reflect on the Feast of the Holy Family. And now we conclude, as we usually do, with the reading from the Mass of the day of Christmas.
O God, who wonderfully created the dignity of human nature and still more wonderfully restored it, grant, we pray, that we may share in the divinity of Christ, who humbled himself to share in our humanity, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever.